Bottoms up. Now a warning. Now a warning? Take care of...
Hi YouTube, this is Raven. I'm a survivor of a 16-year marriage to a covert narcissist, or someone with a personality disorder. I'm not sure whether he had narcissistic or borderline personality disorder, as he has not been officially diagnosed by a mental health care provider with NPD or BPD. This is just simply my opinion based on a 16-plus year marriage and my observations of his behavior. That being said, I've wanted to do this video for a while because, it's now May, and at the end of this month, it will be 3 years since I separated from my husband and got out of that toxic relationship. And I sit here and I think all the time, how the hell did this happen? How did someone that, I consider myself to be a smart, capable person, yet somehow I ended up with this toxic person? And if you're coming off of a relationship with a toxic person, you're probably, experiencing low self-esteem. Your bank account is, in the negative. Your credit's probably ruined. Relationships with family and friends have been ruined. And your life has been turned upside down. And you probably thought of yourself as an intelligent, capable person, yet somehow you fell for this con artist. And, it totally ruined your life, maybe ruined your kids' lives. And you wonder, how did this happen? And so I've had 3 years to reflect on this. And next week, I will be graduating nursing school. And that is no small feat. I can tell you that. Some of the doctors that I've been in clinicals with, that they sit there and they're like, hands down to you. It's like going to medical school is a lot easier than going to nursing school. It's like I couldn't do it. And I sit there and I think, what could I have accomplished if I didn't have those 16 years being married to the narcissist? What could I have accomplished by now in my life? And so I sit back and I think, how did this happen? How did I, get in this relationship? And I've had a lot of time to think about it. And I realize now that he was not the first narc that I had in my life. And I was coming off of a bad relationship breakup, and I think that, and I was vulnerable at the time, and my self-esteem was very low, so I was ripe for him to swoop in and love bomb me, and and fall for his charms, because I just didn't know what the red flags were, and I didn't have the self-esteem or the boundaries in place to step back and and say no. But I wanted to do a video to kind of illustrate some of the red flags that I missed. And if you've ever watched Serena Nightshade's videos, she calls them predators instead of narcissists. She calls them predators. And once you've been in a relationship with a predator, she talks about how you go up the rungs of the ladder to where you come out of a relationship with a low-level predator. And you learn, their tricks, their tactics, the red flags. So you miss that. But then the next time, the predator that you might be in a relationship with, that predator knows, it's like, okay, that's not going to work on this person. I got to try this. And so I think that's what happened, that he was testing me. He was testing the waters, and he knew what to say and what to do to get me to fall for him. And I found this article. It's off of ladywithatruck.com. 30 red flags you might be dating a narcissist. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it, and then I'm going to tell you some of the red flags that I missed when I was dating my narcissist. And I'll put a link to the article in the description box below. But she has some really good red flags. I'm not going to read all of them, but number one, the biggest number one without fail sign of a narcissist is how they sweep you off your feet. Yep. He seems too good to be true. He wants to know everything about you. They're seldom alone for long and will still be in a relationship or just leaving one. Appears to make friends easily but doesn't have any long-time friends. Very forceful sexually, wants sex within the first date or two. They're either between jobs or just started a new job. Yeah. They have nothing except excuses why they have nothing. Oh yeah, my narc will tell people that, you know, he's broke. He's broke. You know, he's given all his money to his ex-wife. Yeah, well, I haven't seen one red cent of that yet. Their exes are all paranoid psycho bitches. Oh yeah, he would tell me about his bad breakup. Changes jobs many times, gets bored. Past accomplishments or experiences that are just a little too far-fetched or too good to be true. He's so good-natured you can't imagine him getting angry about anything. Yeah, except when you marry them and then they turn into, you know, the devil at home. More than likely, he appears almost naive and helpless. I felt that he loved me more than I loved him. Oh yeah, because he was like, you're the love of my life. You know, I've never met anyone like you before. You know, except the last person you dated, and you said that to her too. Very early in the relationship, he talks in terms of we terms, saying things like, we are going to take the car or the truck, not your car or mine. Let's see, what else? Yeah, early in the relationship, we'll ask you to do a favor for him or run an errand. He'll borrow a small sum of money and pay you right back. Yeah, well, mine borrowed money and never paid me back, so... Insists on sleeping snuggled up all night and points it out to you how he has never been able to sleep wrapped up with someone like that before. Yeah. And he will say he loves you early in the relationship. And if you find yourself thinking he has so much potential, all he needs is a good woman to believe in him, run. Oh, very, very good advice. But I didn't read all 30. You'll have to check out the article for yourself. It's ladywithatruck.com. 30 red flags you might be dating a narcissist. Now, some of those red flags he had, some of them he didn't. But early on when I met him, he didn't remember that we had met before. And I thought that was interesting. We had a drive-by date, you know, like you're sitting around minding your own business and somebody comes by and pops, you know, pops a couple caps in you, you know, drive-by. That was kind of like the way our first date was. I was sitting in the cafeteria in college eating breakfast, you know, minding my own business. You know, the cafeteria is pretty much empty because it's breakfast. You know, college students, you know, like to sleep till noon. But this is like 8 o'clock in the morning. And I have a 9 o'clock class. I'm eating breakfast. And he comes along and he's got his tray. And he comes along and he hones in on me like, is this seat taken? And I'm like, well, no, but like, you know, there's like 100 other chairs you could sit in. And so, you know, I'm like, to be polite, I'm like, no, it's not taken. Oh, good. And he's like, you don't know me, but I know you. Okay, that's creepy already. I'm a friend of David. David, I'm going to call him David. That's not his name. I'm a mutual friend of David. I'm really worried about David. Are you worried about David? And David was coming out at that point. This is 20 years ago, so coming out at that point in time was a big deal. Even Ellen DeGeneres, she came out about that time, a little bit afterwards, and she lost her show. She had a comedy show, and you know, then she finally got her talk show. But I was like, well, you know, that's really David's business, you know. Oh, yeah, but I'm worried about him. You should be worried about him too, you know. And the conversation with David lasts about 30 seconds. And then he's now on to something else. And just yak, 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 me, yak, yak, yak. You know, he's talking about himself. I this, I that, I this, I that. And, you know, that should have been a red flag for me, that this guy loves to talk about himself a lot. You know, and he's talking himself up almost like it's a sales pitch. And so I eat breakfast, and I'm like, okay, well, you know, I got to go. You know, my class is across campus. Okay, well, please be praying for David. I'll pray for David. Will you pray for David? Like, okay, bye. And so it was about a year later before I saw him again. And, you know, this was like a drive-by date. You know, like, you know, I've been minding my own business, and now, you know, he's doing this drive-by date. But this is also kind of a drive-by. A year later, he's walking back to his dorm, and I'm walking back to my dorm. And he's got this huge case of beer on his shoulders. He's walking along, and he's like, hi. And I'm like, hi? Like, guess what today is? I'm like, Tuesday? I don't know. He's like, it's my 21st birthday. I'm going back to my room to get drunk. I'm like, okay. Now, here, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what a loser. I mean, what a loser. That, you know, he's 21 years old. He doesn't have friends who are going to take him out to get drunk, because that's normally what happens. You have a group of friends like, ooh, it's Raven's 21st birthday, let's go. And he's going to go back to his room and drink a whole case of Red Dog. I'm like, okay. But, you know, then a month later, I guess he was testing the waters, you know, because I didn't say like, oh, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. Or, you know, maybe he wanted me to come back to his room and drink with him. I don't know. But, you know, a month later, he's asking me out. And he keeps asking me out. And he finally wore me down. And I'm like, okay, fine, we'll go out. And he took me to a steakhouse. And it was a very expensive steakhouse. So, I mean, that was love bombing already. Because, you know, in college, you know, you're broke. You know, you're supposed to be broke. So, no, sorry, there's a lawnmower outside. But, you know, you're supposed to be broke. But yet he feels the need to impress me. And he takes me out to the steakhouse. But then when the waiter comes by, he's like, oh, I have a coupon. I have a coupon. And he's showing the waiter the coupon. And you can just see the waiter just like, yeah. And I almost think the waiter felt sorry for me. Like, you're really out with this guy? I mean, seriously? But then, you know, he opens the menu and he's like, oh my God. The cheapest thing on the menu is $13, and that's the chicken. And, you know, that should have been a red flag for me. It's like, okay, you know, first of all, this guy's cheap. You know, he likes to spend money he doesn't have, because he continued to do that. He even does it to this day. He spends money he doesn't have. You know, just a couple weeks ago, he spent 2 weeks in Europe. He doesn't have money for a $10,000 trip to Europe. Or at least, you know, he claims he doesn't. He claims he's broke. And he's about to be let go from the job he has now, but yet somehow he has $10,000 to spend in Europe. You know, he just spends money left and right, because narcissists like to pretend that they are a higher social status, class status. They like to pretend that they're rich and they have money. And, you know, they drive cars that they can't afford. They live in houses they can't afford. And so, you know, he's love bombing me at this steakhouse. But then the next date, you know, after he thinks he's got me hooked, he took me to McDonald's. And I'm like, okay, you know what, that's fine. You know, I like McDonald's. That's good. You know, we're college students. And I felt guilty about him taking me to the steakhouse. Because, you know, like, oh, you know, he spent all his money. He doesn't have any money. We get up to the counter, and he has a coupon for a free meal. And he pays for his meal with the coupon. Then he turns to me, do you have $5? Do you have $5 that I can borrow? I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I thought this was a date. It's like, now I'm having to pay. He didn't pay anything for his meal, and now he's asking for $5, you know. But, you know, he was charming, you know. But yet I should have seen that he was cheap, because when we went on the first date, instead of driving me back to the dorm, he parked at the Catholic Campus Ministries, which is about a mile from campus. And he parked at the Catholic Campus Ministries, and that's for Catholic students. I thought he was Catholic, you know, because Catholic students park there. But no, he was just too cheap to pay the $100 that you pay for a parking pass for a year at the college. And so we parked at the Catholic Campus Ministries and had to walk back to the dorm. You know, this guy is cheap, and he's remained cheap, you know. But, you know, and he was lazy, because, you know, his grades were horrible. I mean, his grades were in the toilet, you know, to use that analogy. And they were so bad, his parents were threatening to take him out of college. And I remember at the time thinking, that's horrible. You know, he's struggling. He's really trying. No, he wasn't. He's lazy. And he's remained that way the rest, you know, the rest of our marriage. He was lazy. And, you know, that's why he doesn't get promoted at work, because he's too lazy. He doesn't want to go back to school to get his MBA so he can get promoted. And instead, he's getting fired. You know, and he'll complain, you know, about that. But, you know, I should have seen that he was lazy. But I should have also seen that I was being love bombed by him and his parents. When I first met his parents, I mean, he took me to see his parents. I mean, we've only been dating like maybe a month. And he takes me home to see his parents. And his parents had fixed steak and shrimp cocktail and baked potatoes and cheesecake and wine. I mean, they were love bombing me, because they wanted to make sure that this one didn't get away. And that should have been a warning to me that they were seeing that I was taking him off their hands. You know, I was going to take him off their hands for them. But, you know, and he also said he loved me very early on in the relationship. I mean, we've only been dating for a couple weeks, and already I'm the love of his life. We're soulmates. I'm the love. You're the love of my life. You know, and that should have been a red flag because I wasn't feeling that. You know, and the same thing. He liked all the music I liked and all the movies that I liked, and you know that just doesn't happen. You know, like, you know, even though, you know, once we were married, a few years after we were married, you know, iPhones came out and iPods, and I had an iPod with, you know, like a couple hundred songs on it, and so he downloads all the music from my iPod, and he's listening to it like, oh, this is really great music to run to, and I'm like, you don't like any of my music, but, you know, all of a sudden he loves my music, even though, you know, he made fun of me that I like to watch the TV show Glee. But yet, you know, he would listen to like the Glee soundtrack, like, oh, it's great music, you know. But, you know, there are so many red flags that I missed. You know, that he was very selfish. He was into himself. And he always loved to talk about himself. He liked to inflate his achievements. Like, he's the only one at work that discovered this problem and it saved the company millions of dollars. Well, if it saved the company millions of dollars, why are they firing you? Like, why are they letting you go if you're so indispensable? But there are so many red flags and that I missed because I was vulnerable and my self-esteem was low. And you really have to take the time once you are out of a relationship with a person like this to really get to know yourself again, and to set up boundaries and to know what it is you will accept in a relationship and what you won't. And until that happens, you're going to continue that pattern. You're going to fall for these people every time. So, like I say at the end of my videos, be vigilant, be safe, take care. And that's what I mean by be vigilant. Know the red flags, know the signs, know what to look for. Take care of yourself first. And, you know, be safe. Well, anyways, that's all for now. Be vigilant, be safe, take care. Watch out for red flags.